Hi, and welcome back to Trauma, Drama, and Life. I am your host, Kayla Taylor, and
I'm Ben Taylor, and we're excited to be back today to be able to talk through some of the questions that you guys have submitted or have sent in. So if you want to have a specific topic that you want us to talk about, that you want us to go over, walk through, anything like that, feel free to either DM us on Instagram at rawmotivations.com. If you're listening on Spotify, there's a place where you can actually ask a question, drop an answer underneath the episode, or you can send us an email at ben@rawmotivations.com. We'd love to be able to hear from you guys. You guys have been super excited and super awesome just listening to the stuff that we've had to put out there, and we've got a lot of stuff we want to talk about and share. But we also want to hear from you guys as well of how we can keep improving and how we can keep working on the episodes as we continue moving forward. So one of the questions that came in the other day that we wanted to dive into a little bit was a question about me accusing my spouse, me accusing Kayla of different things in the relationship, and wanted to kind of dive into that. My first response was, I didn't accuse her of anything, because I was a perfect person. And she proceeded to say that wasn't true. I thought it was going to be a short episode. But needless to say, that's kind of the topic that we're going to dive into a little bit of in the relationship. What did I do? How did I accuse you of things?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing, there's like a couple of examples starting with effort, empathy, cheating, etc. So with Ben, especially, I think it was really when he was in the thick of it, like when we were both in the thick of it, probably like 3 or 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
He and I would ask him, I'm like, I just feel like you're cheating. Is that true? I think you're cheating with X, Y, and Z.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, no, I'm not cheating. You're the one who's cheating. Like, you're so-and-so is liking your photo, or this person's liking your photo on Instagram or commenting, like.
Or you have these friends on Snapchat.
Yeah.
That was probably like my biggest one of like,
Yeah.
What about so-and-so on Snapchat that you send snaps to?
Right.
So therefore you're definitely like cheating on me, that thing.
Yeah. So that was definitely something that you would accuse me of. And the lack of empathy would kind of coincide with, if I would have a hard day and I was expressing that I had a hard day, he would always try to like one up me of like, no, I had a hard day. I did X, Y, and Z at work today. You just did X and then came home and did Y and Z. Mm-hmm. But I did X, Y, and Z at work, and now I'm having to come home and do X, Y, and Z. And so just in that aspect of...
There's always like an aspect of like I had to one up you because you were taking the attention off of me, mm-hmm. or you were taking more focus off of like who I was or what I'd done or anything like that. It mainly came down to the fact that like I couldn't stand you having more attention. Your problems couldn't be bigger than my problems because my problems were like the biggest because obviously the world revolves around me. Like that's like the focus, right?
Right. So.
I mean, that's what I thought, even joking wise, that the world revolved around me. And I mean, I'd say that, right?
Oh, yeah. There would be several times that you're like, well, I would say something along the lines of, everything doesn't revolve around you. And you're like, yes, it does.
Yeah. I mean, it's very much so. Like, I'm trying to think back. Like, the world revolved around me, and I was perfect. I think those are like two of the main things.
Oh yeah, we would get into arguments really about
how perfect I was.
How you were never wrong and you never made mistakes, mm-hmm. because you were always perfect. If I brought up something to your attention and said, hey, could you do this a little differently next time, then you automatically would discount what I was saying and say, no, your way is wrong, my way is right, because I'm the perfect one.
Right. Because at that point, like, you were questioning, like, my perfection that I was fabricating or mm-hmm. trying to build or trying to imagine or just trying to be a part of the mask. Like, the mask was, I'm a good person that, is faithful to you and, is perfect. And, yeah. You were encroaching on that. You were getting too close to the truth of me not being perfect and me having to admit that I was possibly less right than what I wanted to admit,
Well, yeah, because every time that we would have this conversation and that I would prove you wrong, like dead wrong, it would be really hard for you to actually admit that you were wrong.
Yeah, I mean, off the top of my head, I don't remember many times that when you proved I was wrong, I ever admitted it. Maybe like a handful,
You
maybe.
would say you would say along the lines of, "Yeah, I was less right," or
Hmm.
something, but it was never
Or I'd flip
I
it,
was wrong.
or I'd flip it and say like that's what I said.
Yeah. Then you would go to like gaslighting and
Right. I did that a decent amount of. You'd say like this cup is blue, and I'd be like, no, the cup is red. And then like when you finally prove me wrong, I'd be like, yeah, it's blue. That's what I said. And then I'd walk away because at that point, then I switched in my mind that I won the argument, even though I didn't win the argument. I had to come out on top. I had to come out in like the positive light.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that is for sure something that was a struggle. It's definitely better now. He has a newsflash. He's not perfect. Nobody's perfect. So if you're
Don't tell him that. Right.
But yeah, so now it's a lot better when we have these discussions and I bring a point up and it's valid, then he's like, okay, I can see that. Like, I was wrong. And it's taken him a while to do that.
Right. And I mean, it's still not easy.
It's not like first nature anymore.
Right. It's still hard. It's still not like the subliminal programming still hasn't been completely rewired because there's that piece inside me that's like, no, you're right. You're always right. You know, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So there's always like a piece that's fighting sometimes with me knowing like that I'm actually not always right and I need to be able to take that down a notch of what I'm thinking. And ultimately that comes back to the idea of like my ego. It's like I don't want my ego to be hurt. I mean, how would you characterize my ego like in the relationship? Would you say I had a big ego?
Oh, yeah. You were just full of yourself. Like, I think whenever I tell people how I first perceived you was you were just this like cocky prick.
Mm-hmm.
And
should have gone off your first
I
instinct.
know, I should have. And normally I do go off my instincts. But again, it's just that, I don't know. You tell a narcissist like what you look for in a person and that's just, they conform to that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't think that in that aspect, if it would have been different or if I wouldn't have been like so young, I probably would have went about our relationship a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's what, and so it took me a while for us to even like talk, because I think that he kept trying to get me to talk to him more or hang out with him or whatever, and I was just like, I'm not gonna hang out with this dude. Like, he's just like arrogant.
Yeah, it took me a while to make you fall in love with me.
Yeah. So so it just took a while, and because I was like, I'm not gonna be with somebody who's like arrogant and cocky and thinks he's all that in a bag of chips. Like,
mm-hmm.
no, thank you.
Yeah. Well, in reality, I was just the bag of chips. Wasn't all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, like going through like our relationship, there's many times where, like you mentioned before, where I did accuse you of stuff. I did like push that on you. What tools or tips would you suggest with people who are trying to deal with that? Because it can be really kind of like a crazy like mental thing with people trying to justify like, no, I didn't do this, when they know they didn't do it, but there's still a lot of confusion that happens. Like, what would you kind of say towards that?
I think my biggest piece of advice is to stick with what you know is true, because it can be a huge mental game, because there's so much that goes into that when they're accusing you of things that you're not doing. It's obviously like gaslighting and manipulation, because they're trying to flip the script and make you feel like you are the narcissist, or you're in the wrong, or you're doing something that they're actually doing. And I mean, I could bring solid proof to Ben and say, look, this is why I think this is what you're doing, blah, blah, blah. And he would flip it, like immediately discount what I had to say and flip it right back and say, no, actually you're doing that. Like, that's not me.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the biggest piece of advice is just to stick with what you know is true. So if you have proof that that your person is doing X, Y, and Z, and even if you say something to them and they try to flip the script, just go back to sticking to like the proof that you have or the consistency that they've had that shows their lack of effort or their lack of empathy or even cheating, and just sticking with that, because it can just be a huge mental like detriment to yourself.
Right. And I think I did that a lot where I'd flip it around back on you, or I'd probably one of the more popular ones at times was to take whatever argument you had and try to just destroy the argument. Or if I could do that, then I'd bring up something in the past or try to destroy you.
Yeah.
That way your argument didn't have any legs to stand on, theoretically, in my mind.
Right. And I think that's what we had talked about in either the previous podcast or a couple podcasts back, about how we are both very logical. So he would take any flaw in my logic and like completely like destroy it. And at that point, my like mental capability wouldn't be able to recover fast enough, because I knew that I was just in this like fight or flight mode. And so as soon as like I made a mistake, I knew that there was no recovering from that, because he was going to stick with that one flaw. Or even if I missaid something, he would say, well, you said it like this just a few minutes ago, so obviously that's the valid one and the other ones are incorrect.
No, that makes sense. I know you mentioned that I accused you of cheating, and I remember I remember bits and pieces of that, like as it happened. But like, did I ever accuse you of like not having empathy or not caring in one sense?
I think, I don't remember if it was empathy, but you did at times accuse me of not caring. Like if I was having a harder day and you would magically be having a harder day too, I would be expressing how hard my day was, and you would say, well, you just don't care about me because I had a hard day too. Like,
right. Why are you not focusing on me?
Correct. Like, why aren't you focusing on me? Like, it should be all about me right now.
Did that ever register or feel that way, as far as you noticing that's what he's doing, but he hasn't expressed any care about my day or about the stuff that I've been going through?
It didn't really register that until later on, towards when I was just getting worn out, like completely, because for the longest time I was just like, okay, I just need to be there for him and listen to him, and then he'll be there for me, and just keep that cycle going. And when I started to realize that the cycle was no longer like continuing that way, he wouldn't care about what I had to say, or he wouldn't care about how my day was, then it kind of made me not want to care. And there was at times that I know that I would check out, like he would tell me about his day and I would just be like, okay.
Right.
But it was like I was sitting there listening but wouldn't respond, or
which would frustrate me at times, because I wanted a reaction. I wanted a response to know that I mattered more than everything else in the world.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
And at that point, I was like, I don't really know what response you want, because if I give you advice, then you don't like that advice because you want to do your own thing. But if I don't respond, you think I'm not listening.
Right.
So it just became this huge doom and gloom type situation.
I feel like there's a lot of times I asked you for advice, but at the end I just wanted your validation for my idea that I had already. There wasn't really... The majority of times I'd be like, I don't know, like, do you want me to wear this or this? And you'd say the first one, and I'd be like, yeah, okay, and I'd wear the second one. Because, like, that's what I wanted to do anyways, but I wanted your, like, I don't know, validation, I guess, or something. You just kept picking the wrong one. Like, you didn't know which one I wanted you to pick. That kind of thing.
And then that would end up turning into these arguments, because I would say, well, you asked for my opinion, but you went for the opposite. And so for the longest time, I didn't really give my opinion, and that would frustrate you too, because then you were just like...
But it was like an environment that I slowly made that made you feel less safe to be able to express your opinion, because if your opinion didn't match up to mine, then it was discredited and devalued. Of like, your opinion's stupid because you didn't choose the one that I already thought in my mind that I was supposed to have.
Yeah.
But I guess you can't read my mind. That's probably part of the problem. Someone else like wrote in and they mentioned asking you specifically, how did you know / suspect that Ben was cheating?
It was a gut instinct.
Hmm.
I'd already known. I don't really, I mean, really, it's just gut instinct because even the first time that he had cheated, I would constantly ask, "Are you cheating with X, Y, and Z?" And he would deny it.
Hmm.
And obviously, come to find out, I was correct.
Right.
And the same thing with all of the other affairs. It was just a gut instinct. And so it was, yeah, that's like the biggest thing.
And many people today, especially when they're with a narcissist, discount their gut. Like they
Hmm.
don't listen to it. They don't like think anything of it. They're just kind of like, oh, like got indigestion today. Like they don't really like they pay attention to like
Right.
those gut feelings.
Yeah. And I get it because for me, sometimes it's hard, especially like as a Christian. Like, I obviously have to check my gut, but also make sure that that's coming from God and not just like my own, like, personal, like, nature of just wanting it to be about me or
Hmm.
whatever. And there was often times that I would discount my gut as well because he would sit there and deny it. And typically, when I would say something about it, he would love bomb basically for the next like 2 or 3 days and then make everything seem like it was okay, like we were
Hmm.
fine, show affection to me, do whatever. And then it would just go back to normal. So
Hmm.
it was the manipulation aspect of love bombing to try to get my mind off of that. So then in return, I would discount my gut feeling of like, okay, well, maybe I am wrong. Maybe he's not, but it just, something just doesn't feel right. And then when I would find out, I would like get upset at myself because
Hmm.
I'm like, I knew that this was happening. I knew it. I knew it. And so
Right. What do you feel like you've done now to try to get to a place where you trust your gut more?
I just trust my gut. Because the majority of the time, my gut is correct. And if it's not, there hasn't, it's not like it's like
A big thing.
a big situation or
Hmm.
something that is going to be detrimental. I haven't had a gut feeling that he has cheated since I came back. And if I did have that gut feeling, I would probably, one, I would start making plans to leave.
Hmm.
And two, I would be searching for the proof because I know that there would be proof because even though he was good at hiding things, there was still little flaws that I knew that I could catch.
Right. It's just at that point with you being trauma bonded and me gaslighting and stuff
I
like that.
didn't want to find the proof.
Right.
I had no, I, I didn't care to.
Right. Which I think that brings out an interesting point that I don't think has been talked about of like people that they have that gut instinct, but they actually don't want to find the proof. Like,
Hmm.
is that, would you say that's more of like a fear base of like, I'm afraid to find the proof of like what might actually come about?
I think it depends on what the person is feeling. So for me, it was more of almost like a panic of if I find out, I know what I need to do. I know I would need to leave. But I still, for some reason, obviously it's trauma bonded, but I still see the good in him, which obviously at that point, what good was there?
Right.
But
There
in my
wasn't any at
mind, there
that
was
point.
still like something that was good. Like, if you ask me, I really couldn't tell you because I look back and I
Hmm.
just talked about this in my counseling. Like, I look back and I'm like, I don't understand how I was physically or mentally even going throughout my day because of how much like trauma I was feeling and I was taking and everything else. And honestly, like, it's just by the grace of God that I was able to get up every single day and I was able to go throughout my day and I was able to mask like what I was going through because there's plenty of people who are shocked who listen to this podcast and they're like, wow, I didn't even realize you went through that or
Right.
something.
You had
And
a friend say that the other day, just they didn't
mhm,
realize stuff that you'd been through.
yeah. And now like looking back at that, I also, in one sense, I wish that I would have told more people. But this is also something when you're with a narcissist that you don't want to admit that there's something wrong.
Hmm.
especially when it's like this serious or this big or
Right.
whatever.
Which I definitely think we could probably make a whole podcast episode on that, as
Yeah.
far as like the shame of admitting that you're with a narcissist, that, you know, it's actually awful and behind the scenes, and nobody wants to actually admit that.
Yeah, that can be a whole nother podcast because I could talk a lot about that.
Okay. Well, we'll mark that down. If there's topics specifically that you want us to answer, we read off a couple questions today, but if there's topics that you specifically want us to answer, feel free to email us at ben@rawmotivations.com, or just pull up Instagram and DM Raw Motivations. Would love to be able to get some more feedback info from you guys. Just want to say thanks so much for all the support. You guys have been incredible. Just listening, sharing, liking, giving your views. Like, thanks so much. And we'll be back next week with another podcast.
Sounds good.